Hey everyone, I want to walk you through a story that on the surface looks routine. Company moves headquarters. Happens all the time. But what we are actually watching in California is a structural fiscal erosion, dressed up as a series of individual corporate decisions. And the reason this one stopped me is that nobody is leaving dramatically. No open letters, no press conferences. Just quiet, logical, and inevitable math. February 2026. Public Storage, largest self-storage company in the United States. 3,500 locations, 5,000 employees, founded in California, 1972. Announces its moving headquarters to Frisco, Texas. 50 years in one state and gone. Here's the detail that matters. Week before that announcement, Senate Bill 709 took effect. A California law placing a direct price control on self-storage industry. Public Storage had funded the lobbying campaign against it. They lost the political fight and then they executed the only other rational move available to them. Sometimes the quiet exits are the loudest signals, and there's one number buried in all of this that explains exactly why this keeps accelerating. Stay with me. Now, public storage is just the most recent entry on a list that has been compounding for years. Chevron, operating in California since 1879, 140 years of state residency. August 2024, relocating to Houston. Their president Andy Wall described the recruitment problem in terms that should concern any economist watching this. He says a lot of our employees will not move to California. Not cannot, will not. Talented professionals were declining promotion rather than relocate there. That's not a tech story, that's the human capital flight story. And it's harder to reverse than a tax rate. Then there's the in-out burger. If any brand represents California cultural identity, it's in-out burger. The granddaughter of the founder opened a second headquarters in Franklin, Tennessee. Her reasoning was not corporate efficiency language. She said directly, raising a family is not easy here. Doing business is not easy here. And then she added that Tennessee gives her employees better chances to buy a home. Her own employees working for one of the most recognizable California institutions in history could not achieve basic housing stability near where they worked. That's the cost of living indictment, not a political opinion. Tesla, Oracle, Palantir, SpaceX, and the one that carries real irony, CBRE, the firm that professionally advises other companies on real estate and relocation strategy. They relocated out of California. The people who track corporate exits become the one leaving. Since 2020, over 200 companies have left the state. More than half went to one destination, Texas, consistently. That's not a coincidence, that's a revealed preference playing out at scale. Now, here's the number that reframes everything. In California state budget, personal tax constitutes nearly 70% of the general fund revenue. The national average is 38%. California's fiscal structure is almost twice as dependent on personal income taxes as a typical American state. That single fact changes the entire risk profile of everything else we are discussing. Because it means when high income earners leave, not just the billionaires, but senior engineers, executives, and managers earning 2 to 300,000 a year, the revenue impact is not proportional, disproportionate. The concentration risk is built directly into the budget architecture, and when your revenue base is that narrow and that base is mobile, you have a structural vulnerability that no short-term policy fix addresses. In just over 3 years, $102 billion in adjusted gross income has left California through interstate migration. For context, that figure exceeds the combined GDP of Wyoming, Vermont, Alaska, North Dakota combined. This is not wealthy people chasing better weather. It's a sustained multi-year reallocation of economic weight. It's leaving a hole that keeps harder to fill. This is not about politics, it's about math. And the math doesn't care about ideology at all. So let me make this more concrete. Think about a senior engineer, call him Tariq, earned 3,000 a year. His company just relocated its headquarters to Austin. Now he has a decision to make. California's top marginal income tax rate is 13.3%. Taxes is zero. That differential represents roughly 35 to $4,000 annually, real. After tax income that compounds over time into housing equity, savings, and financial stability. The calculus is not complete. But here's where the structural damage compounds. When Tariq leaves, the revenue liability doesn't disappear. It redistributes across the remaining tax bases, which makes staying marginally less viable for the next high earner, who then runs the same numbers and reaches the same conclusion. That is a fiscal death spiral, not rhetorical language, but an actual self-reinforcing feedback loop embedded in a budget's own architecture. That and California is inside one of right now. So what is the policy response? And this is a genuinely difficult to watch. Newsom's office last year highlighted that California still holds 58 Fortune 500 companies, more than Texas, more than New York. They also noted that headquarters are launched in California at 4 times the rate they depart. That argument has a fundamental flaw in its methodology. It confesses volume with economic weight. The companies leaving are Chevron, Public Storage, entities with billions of dollars revenue bases, large payrolls, and significant tax contribution. The headquarters being launched are predominantly early stage startups that may not generate material tax revenue for years, if ever. Counting raw headquarters numbers without accounting for fiscal scale is not a defense of California's position. It's a misrepresentation of it. The state-owned nor the state's own non-partisan legislative analysis office has been direct. Six consecutive budget deficits sustained largely through federal COVID relief transfers and an elevated capital gain environment that no longer exists in its previous form. Forward projections show deficit of $27 billion, $22 billion, and $23 billion in successive years. Now here is the moment that crystallized the internal contradiction most clearly. Newsom himself described a proposed billionaire wealth tax as really damaging because high net worth residents become moving assets and business structures out of state in anticipation of its passage. The instrument designed to close the deficit was accelerating the very migration driving the deficit. That's not a policy that backfired. The instrument designed to close the deficit was accelerating the very migration driving the deficit. That's not a policy that backfired, that's a policy working directly against its own stated objective. And this extends well beyond California's border. Illinois lost $110,000 in adjusted gross income per departing resident. Massachusetts lost $141,000. New York is running the same feedback loop, concentration risks at the top of the income distribution, shrinking base, and a policy environment that continues to increase the marginal cost of staying. Any state running its public finances on a hyper-concentrated revenue base of high earners while systematically increasing the cost of residency is watching California right now. Some is a warning, some are already living it. Let's come back to where we started. A company founded in Southern California in 1972, 50 years of presence, 50 years of loyalty to one state. And in February 2026, without drama, without a press conference, they executed the rational decision their balance sheet had been pointing toward for some time. That's how structural fiscal erosion actually works. Not one dramatic collapse, company by company, executive by executive, engineer by engineer, everyone running the same calculation and arriving at the same answer. The political debate around all of this is legitimate, but at a certain point, Budget projections stop being a matter of opinion and become a matter of arithmetic. And arithmetic doesn't negotiate. California built one of the most extraordinary economies in the modern history. That's not in dispute, but the government that draws 70% of its revenue from a narrow, highly mobile tax base is not a resilient fiscal structure. And when that base starts moving, the consequences are not theoretical. They're already in the numbers. Tell me in the comments if you're in California, are you staying or are you running the number yourself? And for everyone else, does your state feel like it's trending in the same direction? Feel free to drop it in the comments.